today, and we're talking with 5 amazing women from World War II, and they're going to be telling us their adventures they had and decorating combat boots. In Her Boots is a project that spun off of a project they have in California for women veterans and honoring what they do and helping them if they need help with housing, schooling, or any background that they need. And so today we've brought together these incredible women, and they're going to tell us their story and how they helped make the country it is. My name is Gwen Hicks. And we have today with us Amy, Emily, Irene, and Mildred.
Okay, we'll start a question first with Mildred. This is Mildred Bruner, B-R-U-N-E-R. Mildred, tell us when you were born, where you were born, and then why you got in the service, and tell us what you thought when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
I was born April the 7th, 1921 in Smith Mills, Kentucky. And my folks moved to Evansville when I was about 3, so I grew up here in Evansville and went to school here. I graduated from Central High School and Deaconess Hospital School of Nursing. And I was in nurses training when the war started.
So you were born what year?
1921.
1921. How old are you right now, Mildred?
Well, right now I'm 96. In a couple of weeks I'll be 96 and a half. I'm counting the months now.
So you were in nurses training at the Deaconess Hospital in Evansville. Tell us what you thought and what the other nurses felt and the staff at the hospital felt when Japan invaded America.
Well, when Pearl Harbor happened, I was a student at Deaconess Hospital, and the thing that impressed me most was one of the girls I was working with was immediately told me that her boyfriend was going to have to go into service. And I thought, my goodness, that's quick. So I was kind of wondering what was going on over in Hawaii when they hit them with all those bombs so early in the morning.
And so then, after you got your training, then you went down to Mississippi. Tell us about what you did in Mississippi and what Air Force base you worked at and what you did for troops down there.
Well, first of all, the person I married was in the Air Force, so I decided to go in the Air Force as a nurse. And I was assigned to Keesler Field, Biloxi, Mississippi, after I took basic training in North Carolina. And I was assigned to 3 wards as a nurse, and it was just regular nurse's duty, taking care of the boys that were in service at that time. And Keesler Field at that time was training B-17 bombers. Anything that pertained to a B-17 bomber, they had a school there for that. And every day bombers were going in and out, flying in and out. That was a big bomber at that time, the B-17 was. And I was assigned to one psychiatric ward, an open medical ward, and then a ward that took care of officers and officers' families. So the open ward was boys that came down with rheumatic fever. And at that time, they were having a problem with heart trouble and arthritis from having rheumatic fever.
And if you worked on the psychiatric ward in Vietnam era and in Korean War and World War II, we had post-traumatic stress. Can you tell us what some of the experience were, the post-traumatic stress that you saw in World War II?
Well, I didn't go in service until October of 43, so these were boys that had already been in service for some time, flying. Well, I suppose they were flying over Europe. I don't know where they flew. They just sent them to that hospital to recover. So And I don't think they called it post-stress at that time. I'm forgetting what they called it.
They didn't call it that then, but what were some of their experiences then that bothered them when they were on the wards that you need to help them?
Well, they were just given relaxing medications at that time and rest. That was the main thing. So that's about the only thing that I ever did for them, was give them medication.
How did you feel the American people were in supporting you and supporting the war effort in World War II?
Well, to tell the truth, I was so busy doing my duty, I didn't think very much about that.
Do you think World War II helped you grow up?
Oh, definitely.
How?
Well, because we had to be very careful about the things we said. We had to buy things with coupons and rations, and you couldn't. The thing that bothered me most that I didn't like, I couldn't get nylon hose. So, and that really was upsetting, because as soon as the war started, you couldn't find a nylon hose. So.
That's interesting. After World War II, they said the lines were probably 3 or 4 blocks long of women trying to buy nylon hose. So that was one that they didn't have a lot during that time.
Yes.
Now, you think of some other things, Mildred, and we're going to come back to you, but we're going to move over to Irene. This is Irene Blessing. Tell us your birth date, tell us how old you are now, and tell us where you were born and what city you went to and what you did in the war.
Well, I'm Irene Blessing. My birth date is November 23rd, 1919. And so, well, I don't remember too much what I did during the war. I do remember that it just seemed like moving from one hospital to another, that we just didn't have any special things, but we did go in that way. And I don't know, it just...
Were you overseas?
I was born in Chicago, and I born and raised in Chicago, and we just went from one hospital maybe into another, but it's...
You were stationed in New York for a while, I thought, and then were you in London for a while as a nurse?
Very short time, and but that, I don't know, I don't remember a whole lot. My memory isn't too good anymore. So.
Did you have any injuries from the war, and
No.
what did you think about the soldiers that were injured in the war that you took care of as a nurse?
Well, it was just like moving from one hospital to another to take care of these boys. Yeah. And I think they appreciated what we tried to do. I know I appreciated being able to take care of them. And it's, I don't know, as I say, my memory isn't too well anymore.
You're probably our oldest living veteran in Evansville, at least woman veteran. How old are you, Irene?
97.
97, so...
I'll be 98 Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, well, thank you for your service in World War II. And we're going to ask Emily Woodridge a few questions. Emily, you might tell us where you were born, raised, your birth date, and a little bit about World War II.
Okay, I was, my birth date was 11/28/24. And just to let you know that I did have a little TIA a few years ago, and I'm coming along still, but it makes me hesitate more than I would normally. Okay. I was a senior in high school when the intercom announced Pearl Harbor had been hit. And we had almost a massive turnout of boys that were in their senior year going right on down and signing up for the service. And our whole town was affected harshly by the war. A man that my dad worked with, he was, my dad was a chauffeur guard at a VA hospital where we were living then. And his son had been there at Pearl Harbor. And my dad said that he came in to work, his normal shift change. And he said, "Tom, don't you want to go home?" He said, "I lost my son today, but he would want me to go on right here." And he stayed and worked his shift after hearing that news. And that's just the way that I grew up. From the time that I was born, we had military people on both sides of my family. My mother's oldest brother was a field surgeon in World War I, and my dad was a Navy guy in World War I. And it went on from there, and my three sons were in the service during Vietnam. But they didn't have to do the ground type fighting. Two were Navy, oldest and youngest were Navy, and my son that lives close to me in the same town of Henderson was in the Air Force. So, and I wanted to get in the service right away, you know. And here I hadn't graduated from high school yet. But I was about to turn 18, which was the limit that they would take at Kentucky Baptist Hospital School of Nursing. And I lied about my age. I thought, well, now November is real close to January. And my birthday was on the 28th of November. So I went all the way through the prepping of us, strip examination, and all that kind of stuff. I went through and I was just so happy. And I got a call to go to the superintendent's office, and she had picked up on that. And she said, "Miss West, I see that you are maybe a little bit early." And I said, "But I need to get in the service." I said, I can't stand to see young men coming home because a lot of my friends, you know, didn't make it through Pearl Harbor." And she said, "I know that when you get to be 18, you'll be an even better nurse than you will be at 17. So anyway, that's the way it came out. There wasn't any, you know, we were laughing about it while we were talking. And anyway, I'm going to jump on through. We had a lot of fun at Kentucky Baptist Hospital. And we all, there was, at my hospital, it was one of the best training schools in the nation. And there was nothing disposable, you know. Everything we did ourselves. We made our own surgical packs and everything. And we literally ran the hospital with RN supervisors and house, charge of house routine type thing. But the first thing that I learned to do when I started with my training was to carry trays from the diet kitchen. They would send them up to the floor on the dummy, and then we would take them off. And I learned to carry a big tray on both hands, you know. But we also gave tender loving care back then, even the RNs did.
And then
And we continue doing that.
then where did you get stationed, Emily, and what part of where did you go in the service?
Okay, I went about, this was a barrack type hospital that they constructed all over the United States because of all the massive wounds and problems that the GIs were having that were coming home and having to wait in Europe and the Atlantic and or the Pacific to get home. And in fact, one of the guys that suffered because he couldn't get to the hospital for major surgery was the guy that I later married and had 4 children die. And I'm gonna, I could talk forever.
But specifically, were you in the United States or Europe, or where were you stationed?
I was stationed at Nichols General Army Hospital in Louisville area.
And they bring troops that were hurt in the United States training, and also from Europe back, and even Japan.
Yeah, my first assignment was the hardest assignment that I ever had in my whole life. And I was put on a 32-bed ward of spinal cord injuries. And they were paraplegic, quadriplegic, and we even had 2 basket cases with no limbs. And these boys some of them had started college on scholarships and things, and they knew they wouldn't be able to do what they'd done before. Not only were they had spinal cord injuries, but they had a lot of other injuries too. And it was the day when penicillin made its entry into the magic miracle drug. And everybody that had a scratch or whatever got a shot of penicillin. And they said, we won't be, and we won't know whether it's whether anyone can have an allergic reaction or not. But they've got to have the penicillin. We can deal with the reaction. You know, they can take care of that. But that was the hardest thing for me because it was about my age, and I would have to sneak off for the first 2 weeks. I'd have to sneak off to the linen closet or something just to get kind of composed. And those fellas with the spinal cord injuries they just went all out. I know they did it on purpose because they had these young cadet nurses waiting on them and doing all kinds of things, you know. So now that was the last 6 months of our nurses training, and we had been a cadet nurse from 9 months into my training. A nurse recruiter had come through our hospital.
Emily, what do you think when we got a signature in May of 1945 when Hitler surrendered, and then the Japanese surrendered in August, September of 45. What were your thoughts? What were your emotions of you and your husband and other women around you and men of those moments of winning the war, and how significant was that to you and other people?
Well, something major had to be done because our men and women too were already suffering great losses. And if we had continued to fight, especially on both fronts, it would have been catastrophic, you know. It would have. I think that President Truman was a very strong man, and he, even though a lot of people thought it was harsh or too much, but he saved many more American lives than were lost at Hiroshima.
And you were an Army nurse, right?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to let Amy, thank you very much. We're going to let Amy Arnold say a few words. Amy, tell us what city you were born in, and tell us why you got in World War II and what you did in World War II.
Jamestown, New York, 12/12/23. and I joined the service from there, World War II. And all I did was secretarial work.
And tell us what secretarial, what base were you working on, and what was secretarial? Would you type a lot, and would you type orders, or type orders for the military going to war, or for supplies? And tell us what base it was. It was in New York?
New York City,
New York City. Was there a lot of people there?
yes.
Yeah. And did you see a lot of people wearing uniform, like 10% of people on the street were in uniform, or not that many?
There's quite a few.
Uh-huh.
It was a major
Hub.
entry and exit
Yeah, yeah.
for World War II.
In the Army. Amy was in the Army.
The Navy.
The Navy. Okay.
And Irene Navy too.
In the Navy. And he worked on board ship. He was a gunner.
What kind of ship was he on, Amy?
A destroyer.
Uh-huh. Stationed out in New York? Yes. How long was he gone from you during the war, and how did you feel about him being gone during the war?
I missed him.
Uh-huh. And did he come back a different person or about the same?
He was a little more mature, probably.
Uh-huh.
You know, he served in the battles
Yeah.
on board ship, and it was
Amy, how long did you serve in the Navy? How many years?
a couple years. The
Couple
war
years.
was over, and I got out.
Okay. Had a family to raise.
Pardon?
You started a family when your husband came home. Emily, how long were you in?
I actually was in until I finished my assignment with Nichols General Hospital. I continued in nursing, but I had as I mentioned, I took one of my patients home with me. And I had him to take care of, but he did really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
We both did really well.
Says a lot for
We
your
were
care.
poor as Job's turkey, but, you know, it was worth it, every bit. He was so good.
Irene, how long were you in the service?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And Irene, on Irene, she was in England 2 years. She treated some German POWs at a hospital, and her husband was in the Navy as well. And when he was in the Navy, he was at Pearl Harbor, and you didn't even know where he was for 2 years. Is that right?
Right.
And Mildred, how long were you in?
I was in from the 19th of October 43 until May of 45. And when my husband came home from overseas, he also was in the Air Force and stationed in Egypt. And he's with the Air Transport Command, sending supplies to the European theater and the China, Burma, India theater. So when he came home, I got out of service. And Philip is the result. My son, of him coming home from overseas.
Right,
And then the war was over in 2 more months. So
all right, I want to ask one memorable memory. If you could just, one memory of your time in the military, what would it be? If you could share that with us. Think about the one thing that pops into your head when someone says, oh my gosh, you were a nurse in World War II. What immediately pops into your head?
well, I really can't say I had one outstanding memory, but I did have, one night they assigned me to a young man that jumped off the pier and broke his neck and became a paraplegic, and they assigned me to take care of him. And I specialed him for about 2 weeks before they shipped him to a hospital near his home. And I think what upset me most was because he said he had just had a beer to drink and they were going to give him a dishonorable discharge. And that upset me. So I felt terribly sorry for him. He was only 20 years old. So,
Irene, what would be your one memory?
Oh dear. my memory isn't too good these days, but I don't know of any one particular memory. I know he was in, he had been in Pearl Harbor, and I didn't know where he was, but we wrote to each other for 3 years, but we never saw each other. But that's about it. I mean, we wrote, and that was it.
That's a real long distance relationship if you didn't see each other for 3 years, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Emily, what would be the one thing that pops into your head of your service when you were in the service? I know there's probably 1,000,
Yeah.
but to pick one, besides meeting the love of your life.
Yes. Well, I met the love of my life when we made our first walkthrough at Nichols General. I didn't know who he was or anything, and it was just a passing through. But later, after I got to work on his ward, I realized that that guy with the dark brown eyes and dark hair and dimples in his cheeks when he grinned, when I saw him as I walked through, he was lying in a hospital bed with a pipe, smoking a pipe, and there was a already gainfully employed cadet nurse sitting beside him reading him poetry. But anyway, then later, my next assignment was at Danville, Kentucky, where it was a psychiatric hospital. I'm just going to skim over that. But after our time at Danville, we came back to Nichols, and that's when I was put on medication, the medication tray, and there were 32 syringes with 3 cc's of CR penicillin. It was mixed in a milky stuff. And I had given all those guys their shot except for one person whose name was Bill Sony. And nobody happened to know about Bill Sony. They said, oh, he's one of these guys that gets in a wheelchair. He talks nurses into putting pillows in, and making him comfortable, and who wheels all over. He visits the other wards, keeps things going. So about this time, this guy comes through in a wheelchair, and I thought, one of the guys in the ward said, hey, have you seen Sony? Well, not knowing it was Sony that he was asking this. They were all in on this. And he took me to 2 different wards looking for Sony. And finally I said, listen, I've got to get back to my original ward or I'm going to get booted out of here. And we were on our way back down through the ramps, and some young guy way down the hall who didn't know what was going on goes, yo, Sony. And I looked at him and I said, you've got a shot coming, don't you? So when we got back to the ward, I just said, now you get yourself over there in that bed, turn on your left side, and I just, that was it for them,
Paybacks were hell for him,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Amy, what would be your one, can you share one memorable moment?
Yes, the end of the war.
The end of the war.
Everybody was celebrating. We were all so happy.
When you were in Party Central, New York City, for the end of the war, that was pretty amazing, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. I want to introduce Marian Miller. Did I say that right? Marian, right? Has joined us, and she was with the Coast Guard.
Yes,
And Marian, how long were you in the Coast Guard?
just 2 years in the reserves.
2 years. And what was your time in? What years?
Oh, I had it all written down. 72 to 75.
So during Vietnam. All right, can you give us a little bio, where you were born?
I was born in Groton, Connecticut in do I have to tell? 41.
You're a baby in this group.
I am a baby in this group. I don't feel like it right now, but I'm a baby in this group in 1941.
What prompted you to
No, 1945.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
1945.
What motivated you to go into the Coast Guard?
Well, my husband was in the Coast Guard, and we got transferred from the Coast Guard Academy to Fresno, California, and he was a recruiting officer. So he just got an extra point when he recruited me.
And was your time in the United States, or did you go?
It was all in the United States.
United States.
Yeah.
In various bases.
At the time, the Coast Guard was instituting a program to get women into the Coast Guard because women were not recruiting into the Coast Guard at the time. So there was a program to get them in a little bit at a time. So I was the first one in California.
You were kind of the poster girl then.
Yeah, and yeah, I was, because we made the front page of the Navy Times.
There you go.
Coast Guard's one of the rare services that it represented in the United States, but Marian's been very helpful in Evansville. I've seen her at all the guards during the funeral processions for the last 10 years or so in Evansville. She's helped out, has been honor guard for many funerals. There have been as many as 250 per year in Evansville, and she's served for most of them in uniform and really dedicated to doing that.
Yeah, but we were one of the first to get the women for the Coast Guard. Now, we couldn't serve regular service. We were reserved. We had to be reserved. We couldn't be full-time, regular
At that time.
at the time.
And that was in the 70s, a long time after these ladies had
Yeah, that really was
paid
the
their dues.
70s.
Yeah, I mean, in the 70s, 30 years after they had stepped out. All right, I've asked all of them to share a memorable moment of their service time. Is there a moment that pops out to you?
Yeah, but I don't know whether or not I should. It was. When I went to Yorktown, Virginia, which was part of the training, they had the new ladies, reservists, over here eating in this dining room. And the regular service people, regular Coast Guard, were over here, and they had a door. And so we're eating, the ladies are over here eating, and Lieutenant Commander came through the door, and he came over to me and he gave me a big hug, picked me up, gave me a big hug, and said, "Hey Marian, how's Warren?" And started talking to me, and he brought me over into the door, through the door, sat down, started eating. Well, I didn't think anything of it. He's the Lieutenant Commander. What am I supposed to tell him? Go sit down? Well, when lunch was over and we went back to doing what we were supposed to be doing, the first class calls me into her office and really let me have it. And I said, well, what was I supposed to do? You know, I didn't know what to do. Well, she let me have it, and she let me have it for a week. I didn't know what to tell him. So when I did see him afterwards, I told him what happened. And I said, don't do it anymore. I said, because I really got him.
Take all of you or none of you.
Yeah. he gave her hell.
It does roll uphill once in a while, doesn't it?
I didn't know what to do. He was a friend of Warren's, and he saw me, and, you know, he just said, hi, how are you? Come on over. And we sat and talked, that's all we did, and he let her have it.
Do you have any other questions?
I think just this is very historic. We've got the Vietnam era and we've got World War II era right here in front of us. Anything you think about, I mean, Marian, you didn't bring up about the importance of winning the Vietnam War. Everybody else brought up the importance of World War II. What did you think about when we won the won the Vietnam War?
I thought it was a wonderful thing at a very high expense. But I thought it was wonderful, and I think that it was something that had to be done. But I think the expense was, I don't think anybody thought the expense was going to be so high. And I think everybody of my generation lost at least one person, at least. I don't think it was a family that was not damaged.
Yeah, 56,000 lost in the Vietnam era, and then in the World War II with these other ladies, over 400,000 lost in World War II, and none of you spoke to that, but that when you lose somebody or somebody, you've talked about injuries, come back with an injury, that's a big problem, but also a loss in the war of a loved one. I lost my uncle in World War II, and my family never forgot it. I'm sure some of you had some of those experiences.
I lost my dad in World War II. And my mom worked in we had a building right across the street where they built submarines. Built a Nautilus right across the street from where I lived. And she lost a finger and she couldn't work anymore. And like I said, I lost my dad. So that's 2 wars that I lost somebody.
What you're talking about, being from Groton, Connecticut, that's one of the homes of our submarines. That's probably won the Cold War from 1950s all the way to 1989. Very important during the Cold War. Groton mostly attacked submarines out of there. But you grew up around submarines. Hyman Rickover being the father of our nuclear navy, you probably heard about him at some time.
Oh yeah, I've met him.
Yes, yeah, he's a famous person. Only 3% of the Navy is submariners, so it's a minor component of the.
Have you ever taken a ride on sub?
Yeah, I've been on subs. Yes.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah. Any other memorable events about a loss in World War II, and then Gwen will finalize this. Any other events of a loss of a loved one or a close friend in World War II from either ladies, Mildred, Irene, Emily, or Amy?
This is kind of strange, but I grew up in Dawson Springs, and I had a neighbor who was a young guy, and it turned out all through my school days, he was kind of like a big brother. He kind of kept tab on me, and we would ride the bike or something like that. Like to give you one example of that, and then I'm going to tell you the important thing. We were riding bikes down Park Avenue. Park Avenue is a dead-end street in Dawson Springs, and he went off to the side, which was a little trail leading from Park Avenue over to the depot, and I stopped at the curb, and he yelled back. He says, "Come on, Kate." He's the only guy that ever called me Kate. "Come on, Kate." And I said, "No, I'll stay right here, thank you." So he came back and he said, "Well, would you come on with me?" And I said, "Well, I had a little bit of a qualm or feeling that you might not be as nice as you're supposed to be." And he said, "I wouldn't have touched you, but he said, I will tell you this, that if you wouldn't come down that trail for me and knowing me well, it wouldn't be likely that you would follow somebody else down that trail. And I thought, it's always stuck with me, even all through my nurse's training and everything. But I wanted to tell you one thing that's so funny, I can't leave it out. It has nothing to do with the actual nursing, but we had to do some things that would take us away from it, even at the location where we worked. And we were all wanting to get tan. We didn't know the sun would ruin us, but anyway, we wanted to take sunbaths somewhere. And so finally some good person decided that we could take blankets and go up on the roof of the hospital and take our sunbaths. At about the same time, red cotton panties were in style. So we would take our blankets up and spread them out, and roller. It was about like a bikini because we wanted. And I'm going to tell you this because it's the way it was, but it's so ridiculous and funny. And we didn't have on bras, but we put cotton balls on our nipples to keep them from getting sunburned. Well, we enjoyed doing that. Well, later, I guess it was only about 2 weeks, two of our girls were dating Bowman Field pilots. They were trained pilots that trained outside of Louisville. And one day we went in, and on the bulletin board there was this little photo, and we looked at it, and one of these glider pilots had glided over the hospital. And here was it looked like little Koopa dolls laying on the roof, and a tiny white spot. But anyway, that was one of the funniest things, no harm done or anything. And nobody said anything about it, that we were able to continue with our sunbathing. But you had to have a few things that would lighten things up. Of course, that was before I went to Nichols General.
I know I will never look at a cotton ball again the same. The rest of you, will be a whole new
We were all adults.
What I would like to do is first thank you all for your service again and for joining us today. And to end, I would like to see if you all could give the camera a salute, and we'll end that way. Marian, Mildred, Irene, Emily, can you do a salute for us still? How many years afterwards?
Mildred?
Mildred, a salute. Can you do a salute?
Can I salute?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, everybody hold it.
Hold it.
Hold it.
Salute.
Okay. Okay.